Hello and welcome to this Tuts Plus series Tumblr Theming 101. In this video we're going to create the markup for our link post type as well as the markup for our pagination. Now as you'll remember from the last video we created the markup for our audio posts and our video post types. So following a similar pattern as the last few videos, what we're going to do is we're going to go to documentation and then we're going to go to the section called posts. And then we're going to look for the block for any posts that are of a link post type. And as you can see, the block for links is called block link. So we're just going to include that in our markup. Okay, now again back to documentation and then to the section about link posts. Now link posts have 5 blocks or variables related to them. Quick rundown. The variable named URL will give you the URL of the link you are sharing in the post. Now this is a little bit confusing, the description here. This isn't a URL to the post itself, that's a permalink. This is actually the URL you are sharing inside the post. Now the next variable is name, and this is the name of the name you have given to the URL you are sharing in the link post. So for instance, you have 2 ways of actually showing a visual for the link you are sharing. One is by the actual URL itself, so www.google.com. The second is just Google. So you can actually name, kind of like the way that anchors work, whereas with an anchor you can actually put in the address that the anchor is linking to, or you can actually give the anchor a name and then it will actually link to the href. So I would advise using name always, and the reason for this is that if a name hasn't been added to the link post, then the URL will be shown by default, so it has a fall through. The next variable is called target. Now this is kind of a little bit of a weird one in the sense that this pattern doesn't follow through for all variables. For all post types even. However, target will append target underscore blank if the user has selected open links in new window on the customization screen. Now, don't worry about that too much for the time being, as we'll go over that when we do our theme customization. But basically what this is saying is that the link currently will open on in the same tab or the same page we are on. However, if the option for open links in new window has been set, then it will open a new page or a new tab. And then finally we have block description and variable description, and again these act the same way as the block caption and variable caption worked for our audio, photo and video post types. So it will check for a description, and if there is a description it will return the description here inside the it'll return the description where the description variable is. So let's create the markup. Now if I go to design very quickly, I would like my link post type, the title or the URL that's going to be displayed here, the name of the URL that's going to be displayed here, to be the exact same as my text post type title or the heading. So just look at the markup. As you can see here, inside the text post type, we have decided that the title will be a H2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same here. And then obviously there's going to be an anchor inside because I believe block level elements have to have the anchor inside. And then back to the variables, we're going to include the URL here. And then we're going to include the name here. Finally, we're just going to append the target variable here. Now, just to go over this, what will happen is the target will either return blank because the user hasn't selected open links in new window, or it will return target underscore. So that would be returned in the HTML markup if the user has decided that link should open in a new window. And then finally, we're going to include our description block. So we'll check for a description. If there is a description, we'll return it here in the description variable, and then we'll close that description block. Now, I've probably gone over this before, but just to clarify again, the reason that we aren't actually including any markup for the descriptions or the captions is because the documentation doesn't state that whether or not this will be HTML safe. Now, I wouldn't wrap this in anything that's text related, such as paragraphs or a heading, etc., purely because this is what's probably going to happen. If I add this content in the description when I'm creating my link post, what Tumblr will actually return for the description variable, excuse me, is this. So as you can see, the HTML has actually already been created for me. So here, we would get that, and it doesn't need wrapping. What I'll do is I'll just quickly take the code here, as this is the link post type markup created, put it into the online editor, and then just going to quickly inspect this. So as you can see here in the code, we have our side, we have our main, and then we have a article for each of our posts. Now, if we just look through them, we can determine what them posts are already by just looking at the markup. So for instance, we've got a block quote here, so this must be the quote post type. We have an image here, so this must be the photo post type. We have a H2 here with an anchor inside it. Now, as I said, for a link, we're going to do a H2 with an anchor inside linking to whatever the site is. And as you can see here, we have the H2 with the anchor inside linking to the site with the name here. And then there's the description with the HTML already created. So all these descriptions or caption variables that are included are already having the HTML markup created for us. So all we need to do now is worry about styling that. So for instance, this is a text post without a title, and this is a text post with a title. Before we move on to creating the pagination, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually modify the article. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to add a class of post, so I've got a hook to style it later. I could just use the article element, but the way I see this is that there could, for some reason, be an article inside my article, and I don't want to inherit the style in there. So I'm going to be very specific when styling the posts and use the class of posts. And then I'm just going to go to documentation, and as I keep mentioning post type, I'm going to look for the actual variable called post type. Now, it's under basic variables, and we used it in the first few videos. And nope, it's not under basic. Sorry, it's under the post section. Sorry. And there we have post type. So that will give us back the name of the current post type as a class. Now, the reason I do this is for two things. One, we've got a hook then. We can then use, say, post video or post text to then individually style this article element. And secondly, if I just take the code now, put it into the editor, and then inspect this again. And have a look at our main element. Here we have class post and then the type. So this is very handy for debugging. I can instantly tell you that you've got a quote, photo, link, chat, audio, text, etc. The nice thing is as well that if I'm looking at a Tumblr site that's having an issue and somebody has set up a post type as a class, I can also then try and work out what post is actually creating the issue, and it's easier to narrow down the logic that could be causing the issue. So for instance, if we hadn't closed the photo block here, it would be quite clear by looking at the markup that there was an issue with the photo block. So that's the reason why I add in post and post type. So it's easier to style the element itself article, and then it's easier to actually create a specific style for a specific post type. So we're going to add that in. Again, just make sure you're saving this as you're creating it as you go along. And if you're using something like Dropbox, or if you're using something like Dropbox, you can always go back to a previous version if there's a problem, or if you're using something like GitHub, you can always push pull, and you can always go back to a previous state. So that's all of the post types created apart from answer. Again, answer technically isn't a post type, but it's something I like to support in my themes. So we will have a look at that in a later video when we do some more post-related markup. Finally, for this video, we're going to be creating the pagination elements. So the pagination is basically the element for navigating to the next page we post on or the previous page we post on. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the documentation. And we're going to go to the section called navigation. The navigation section includes blocks and variables related to pagination as well as for submissions and asks. Now I'll cover these two later on in this video, but first let's just concentrate on the pagination. Now, in terms of markup, the pagination would live outside of our post loop because it actually controls navigating through the site and is based off how many posts we have on the screen. However, if you remember, the block post will print each of our posts up until the limit we have set in our on the customized screen. So we don't want to print 15 paginations. We only want one pagination element. So I'm going to include that just after this closing block posts. I'm going to use a section. And I'm going to give it a class of pagination just to make the styling easier for myself. Now, the first block is a block pagination, and again, like the block posts, unlike the block post, like the block caption or block description, this is a check. So this block does a check, and what it'll do is it'll render if there is a previous or next page. So let's just check to see if we have got any pagination to display. And again, this harks back onto the blocks can act in different ways. So whereas as the block posts would actually loop through all of our posts and do something inside of it, this block pagination, again, like the block caption or the block description, is a check. And it is checking to see if we're going to have a previous and next page. And if we do, we can then have this pagination element inside. Now, again, another set of checking blocks is the block previous page and the block next page. And again, they do exactly what they say with the name. The block previous page will return something inside if there is a previous page. And the block next page will return something inside if there is a next page. And again, like the captions and description, there is a previous page variable and a next page variable. And these will return a URL either to the previous page or the next page. So if we were on page 3, the previous page variable would return a URL to page 1, to page 2, and if we were on, if we were on page 3, the next page variable will return a URL to page 4. So if the current page is page 3, previous page would be page 2, the next page would be page 4. It's worth also mentioning again, these are URLs, so we're going to need to create the anchor and then just point that href to either the previous page variable or next page variable. So what I'm going to do is just go about creating that markup. Okay, so what we do is we check if there is a previous page, and as if there is a previous page, we want to return an anchor that has the href pointing to the previous page URL. So that's the variable name previous page. And then if we just look at the design, we're going to include the phrase prev and page. Now, later on, when I'm going through some tips and tricks, what we're going to do is we're going to use something called language and localization. Tumblr provides support to add localization variables to your theme so that the wording or phrasing used is displayed in the user's native language. Not the viewers, but I believe it's the person who writes the blog's native language. So, for instance, if for some reason I have a Spanish user of this theme, then they would actually be able to have the text changed to whatever previous page is in Spanish. And that is something called localization, and there is a wide range of variables available to do this. And it's a tip that we'll go over before the end of the series, where we just quickly go through our markup and change anything that we've written by hand to one of these variables. But for the time being, we're just going to stick with English, and we're going to create the markup for the next page anchor. Now, if anyone's noticed already that I'm actually coding these opposite to how I've actually included them on the design. And one of the things I've noticed is that I'd actually imagine previous page to be where the next page link is, and the next page link to be where the previous page link is. So I'm just going to adjust the markup accordingly. And I think that's one of the nice things about actually coding your own design, that you can make a design decision like that. Obviously, we could code them as per the design and then you use CSS to flip their location around, but I think this would result in a more useful pagination. So that is the pagination for our index page complete. I'm just going to, yep, that's everything done. So if you just go back to the documentation, I'm just going to go through the last of these blocks and variables related to navigation. So obviously we've got the previous page and the next page variable, which will give us the URL to either the previous page or the next page. Then we have current page, which will give us the page number we are on. So again, to use the example, if we're on page 3, we can actually get the number 3 as a string back from the with the variable current page. And then there is total pages, which will give you the number for the amount of pages we have on this blog. So if you have 100 posts and you have the theme set up to display 10 posts per page, then your total pages would be 10. The last two in this section relate to submissions and ask. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on these, but Tumblr is very community orientated. So the idea of reblogging and likes and sharing content is something that makes Tumblr very unique and makes the content very fresh and new. However, it also introduces another option for a more personal interaction with a blog's users in something called submissions and ask. Now, submissions will allow a user to submit content for your approval, which will then be displayed on your site. So if you had, say, a cooking-based Tumblr blog, and you wanted people to submit their recipes, they could submit their recipes to you, and then you could approve them, and then they would be displayed on your blog with details about who submitted them, etc., etc. Ask is kind of like a Q&A format. So again, if you say have a gaming blog and you wanted people to ask you questions about video games, then you could enable the ask option, and then people would be able to submit their questions to you, and then you could answer them, and then these answered would appear on your blog. Both these require you to actually set them up, as in terms of enabling and setting underneath the settings icon on the Tumblr dashboard. So these aren't actually set up by default. Now, if I look at the design, I'm actually handling or I'm actually housing these underneath what we've classed as our pages area. So for this theme, I'm actually going to use the pages feature and use a redirect. Now, for every Tumblr you have, there is always some predefined URLs that you can't write over, but you can redirect to. So the first one is submit. So any tumblrblog.com/submit will, if the user has set up submissions, will take you to a submission page where you can submit content. The same with archive. For any blog.com/archive will always take you to the archive page for that Tumblr account. The same with ask. Any blog.com/ask will always take you to the ask page as long as the user has set it up. So these are hard-coded URLs, and these are something that we're actually going to point to in the menu itself using pages. So for the time being, we're actually going to ignore these two. However, a use for these would be to say you want a visible button or you want an element that says submit content, then you could use this block submissions enabled and block ask enabled in your header or wherever you wanted to on your theme to then create a call to action for that submit or ask. So that's the remaining navigation variables. It's worth mentioning whilst I'm here, the final or the enhanced pagination called jump pagination. Now, at the moment, all we're going to do is we're going to display a previous and next link. That's all we're going to do with this theme. However, it is possible to create a pagination with a variety of different page links that the user could then jump to a specific page. So, for instance, if we're on page 1, we can create a pagination that will actually create links to page 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can actually, this length is indefinite. So I don't think it is, well, sorry, I don't actually think it is, there is a limit. So you could actually display jump links to the next 10 pages if your blog has them. And that's how the jump pagination works. I'll give a very quick demonstration of the markup because this loops kind of like the blog post does. So that is how you would include it. So again, this isn't a check, but it's a loop. So unlike the block pagination, which checks to see if we need a pagination, in all fairness, I actually should probably create this inside here. So unlike the block pagination, which will check to see if we need a pagination, this jump pagination works like the block post. So for each available page in the jump pagination, it will print some content here or return some markup and content here. And the way we use this is as follows. So we have this jump pagination block, which is going to loop through all the available pages. Then we use this block called current pages. Now what this block current pages does, or current paging, sorry, it's a singular. What it'll do is it'll say if this page that we are currently on in the jump pagination, so we're currently looping through, is the current page, do something here. And usually what I would do here is I would just create a span and then I would include the page number. Now the reason I'm using a span is because if we are saying we are on the current page, then we don't want to create a link to the current page because we're already there. So we need some way of showing that we are on the current page, and using the span, I can then stylize the page number inside to make it look like we are currently selected, or this page is currently selected. However, if the page we have currently looped through isn't the current page, we need to do something else. And what we do here is we use something called the block jump page. So block jump page So let's try and give this some context. So let's say we are on page 1, okay, and we are going to loop for a length of 5. So we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like so. Now, what is going to happen here is the span, the page 1 will be the current page we're on, because we're on page 1, and we're creating a jump pagination of a length of 5. So that will come out like so. Now, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will come out as follows, because they're actually a page we can go to, and it's not the current page we're on. So the H reference for the anchor would be the URL, and then again we'd use the page number here. Okay, so again, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have an anchor here, and that will point to 2, and that will have the number 2 in like so. And then it's just going to copy on like this. Probably just easier with a display like that. So that would be 3, that would be 4, that would be 5, and again 5, 5, 5, 4, 3. So essentially, what we are doing here, I'll put underneath just to give some context. What we're saying here is if we're on page 1, we'll create a jump pagination of a length of 5, and we'll loop through the pages available, so pages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, if the page we are looping through is the current page, so in instance, the very first page would be page 1, and it is the current page, then return a span with the page number inside. However, if the page we are looping through isn't the current page, then it's a jump page, and we want to create an anchor that links to that page's URL and then gives us its page number. So here it would be, for 2, it would be the link to page 2 and then the number 2, page 3, the number 3, page 4, the number 4, page 5, the number 5. And that's pretty much the way it works. It only changes when you get past a halfway point from the start. So as the documentation says, rendered for each page greater than the current page minus 1 half length up to the current page plus 1 half length. Now, 5 is a really strange number to divide into. But what we're going to do here is I'm just going to give a quick example. So say, for instance, we start on page 3. So we're currently on page 3. Our jump pagination is actually going to change. And our jump pagination will end up looking like this. So that is now how our jump pagination is going to look when the markup's returned. And the reason for that is because we are on page 3 and we go 2.5 before our current page number and 2.5 after our current page number because the length is 5. Now, obviously, we can't go 2.5 pages, so I presume it's rounded down to 2. So if our current page is 3, we're going to start on 1 in our loop. We'd create a jump page link because 1 isn't our current page. We'd create another jump page link because 2 isn't our current page. And then we'd create a span because 3 is the current page we're on. Now again, we'd create a jump page link because 4 isn't the current page we're on, and we'd create a final jump page link to page 5 because that isn't the current page we're on. So that is how jump pagination works. And the reason I've spent a bit of time on that is I really actually like this style of pagination. However, it is one of those things where you can trip up. So I'm hoping that explanation's made things a little bit clear for you. However, I'm going to remove it from the markup. And that is everything to do with navigation in terms of pagination and jump pagination and submissions and ask. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to take all of this code and I'm going to put it into the online text editor. Click update. And then we're just going to have a quick look at what we've got. So we view the source. No, we don't want to view source, what we expect. Again, the theme preview itself is an iframe. So you'll just have to make sure you're inside the iframe if you want to view the source via the theme preview. So as we can see here, we have got our aside element with our profile, photo, our blog title, the title for the description, and then the pages doesn't render on the theme preview, so we'll be able to see that on the live site. And then we've got our main element with all of our posts inside. Now, there is no pagination element created here because we only have 7 posts and the blog is only displaying 7 posts. So again, the theme preview, as much as it's really nice to work with, it also has some limitations where you'll actually have to work with the live site to make sure your markup's correct. I think that's about everything for this video. I think the next video we will actually take a look at a quick overview of the markup we've created for the posts, and we're going to fill in any little questions we had, such as the links for the footer of the posts and the styling or the markup we're going to use for the chat. And then we're going to start looking at actually styling this theme. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I do hope you can join me for the next one.